Well, welcome to the Leaders and Loggers podcast. On this week's podcast, we have a special 2-hour episode featuring Rob Hoehn, CEO of IdeaScale and fellow cast member of 4 Days to Save the World. We discuss all things technology and leadership and share a glass of The Floor is Java from No Label Brewing Company in Katy, Texas. My name is Kevin Dawson, and I hope you'll join us for a glass and conversation today. Well, welcome to Leaders and Loggers. And on this week's episode, I am joined by a special guest, my friend Rob Hoehn, who is the CEO of IdeaScale and on the side a Ted Lasso impersonator. Rob and I met on the same team as 4 Days to Save the World, and it's been a quick minute since we've seen each other. So, Rob, welcome to Leaders and Loggers.
Oh, I am so excited to be here. It's been funny, and Kevin, I'm sorry again for the back and forth. I struggled on picking the beer, and I was trying to find one that was kind of rare, and I thought that would make a great story. And it took us a while to actually get on the air, but we're here. That's the important thing.
We are here, which I can imagine that the different types of beers where you are out there in California, that it does take a little while to find the right one. I mean,
yeah.
out here, like my best source for any type of unique and rare beer without having to drive somewhere is this little Chinese market that has like 400 beers.
Nice.
And I was like, where has this been my entire, like I drive by it all the time, and shout out to Mr. T's Markets. Y'all do amazing with it. But like the building looks like someplace like, janky in the hood.
Yeah. Well, you saw the photo I sent you, right?
I did, yeah.
I just said decisions. And it was this huge rack.
It just went on. It's like it went on for miles. I was like, in my head was like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, just singing songs. Come with me.
Yeah, totally. Well, let me. Can I get the sound? I want to get the sound on there. Like, oh yeah, it's perfect. Nice. I love it.
So great. What do you got?
Okay, so I bounced around a lot. I was trying to find an Alaskan beer that I really like because I spent some time in Alaska and I loved it. But I felt that was also a little inappropriate because I'm in California now. I'm in Berkeley, California, and I found this IPA. It's called Sunshine Highway IPA. It's DeLoe Brewing in Lodi. No, I'm sorry, it's in Davis, which is just near Berkeley. It's between here and Sacramento. And there's a funny side story about IPAs in general. In college, a friend of mine said to me one day, beers that we're drinking right now are terrible. Like we're drinking this swill and going to parties, and we need to change that around, right? And his suggestion was, why don't we just start brewing beer every Friday night until we get really good at it? And cut to us, like, we went and stole kegs from the soda kegs from the cafeteria. We did just some terrible stuff, but it was fun. It was great. I got really good at brewing beer. And along the way, there weren't that many IPAs back then. This was, 2000 or so. And I remember, kind of becoming a beer snob a little bit. And, IPAs starting to gain in prominence. And for years, I was like, IPAs suck. Who's going to drink those? Like, they taste terrible. And I didn't drink them for a long time. And my wife makes fun of me all the time because this is like all we buy now are IPAs. Like just like the IPA section in our grocery store. We're always trying different ones. And the other thing I want to say, I love this trend right now, but everyone's standardizing on this can. And the art on these cans is off the charts. You saw the photo I sent you. We can
Yeah.
put it in the show notes if you want. I mean, it's amazing. It's so cool. Now, I will admit, I do pick out beer based on the label. I do that sometimes, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Live a
Yeah.
little, right?
Absolutely.
So I loved this label. I thought it was a perfect summation of California right there, isn't it?
It's a beautiful, I mean, the artwork on there, it's neat to see the creativity in the brewers when it comes to can art. And so speaking of can art, like I texted you, said, I've got this really cool beer that has kind of a retro gaming vibe. So
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I've got this beer from No Label Brewing out of Katy, Texas, in the Houston area. It's called The Floor is Java. So it is a coffee stout, but look at this. Like, I'll put it real close to the camera so you can see. It looks like Mario Brothers on the can, like you're playing it, the video game, and
that is great.
And it has all of that. Yeah, Floor is Java. Yeah, and it's so. And
it's it's serendipitous too, because I am a Java developer.
Exactly.
So that's great. I love it. I love it.
So, it's I love the creativity when it comes to brewers. I love the art aspect. I sit on a board for an art museum. Like, we just need a beer art gallery, I think, needs to be created to celebrate. I mean, you look behind me at all the different cans that are back there. There's just so many just beautiful can designs out there. And
well, there's some interesting movements in beer. And the other thing that I really love is this move away from glass. Because actually, if you look at the recycling stream, glass isn't very recyclable. It's actually hard to recycle it. Whereas aluminum, you can recycle it 100%, which is neat. And it's easy to collect. You can crush it, which is kind of fun. And the other cool thing is it does a way better job of preserving beer than glass, because with beer you don't want any light to get through the can, right? So even that's why most beer bottles are brown, by the way. I don't know if you know that. But even then you still get some light getting through there and messing with it. So it's really cool to see aluminum cans kind of be accepted in the beer brewing community.
And just from a cost sustainability standpoint, it's cheaper.
It's great. I love it.
And so it's one of those things that, because you and I were on Team Climate Change, and so obviously finding sustainable resources is part of what we worked on, and so I'm all for sustainable beer development.
Yeah, exactly. Why wouldn't you be? Right?
Exactly.
Okay, Kevin, I was thinking I had an opener for you, just to change the subject.
Hit me.
Something that I think about all the time is time travel. What is your favorite? What's your favorite time machine? So in other words, is it like a DeLorean,
it's
hot tub?
The DeLorean, hands down.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting.
I grew up watching those movies, Back to the Future.
My
middle brother's birthday actually happened to fall on October 21st of 2015, the day that we came to the future. So we did this.
That's right, Back to the Future Day.
We did this huge birthday with him coming to the future. And so I got him a t-shirt, had the license plate at a time on it.
Sure.
And I've been mesmerized by the DeLorean. Like, I've watched all the documentaries surrounding the John DeLorean and the DeLorean Motor Company. And a friend of mine who's in the air show circuit collects DeLoreans. He's got 3 of them.
Ooh.
And
I need to meet this guy. And
so I've always just been enamored, because the DeLorean just looks cool even when it's not moving. It has this, and definitely the movie definitely helped its appeal. And it's a car that was just ahead of its time.
One of my all-time favorite pranks that I pulled on a friend. I hired a actor up in Seattle. I used to live in Seattle for a long time. One of my best friends lives up there. To be the Western Union guy from the end of movie number 2, right?
Yeah.
And this guy went deep. I had no idea he was going to go this deep. And I knew where he was going to be for lunch, my buddy. And I told the actor, and he dressed up in the trench coat. He was a little bit wet. And I printed out like a worn out Western Union thing and like made it all look old and everything. And this guy went into the middle of the restaurant and was like, are you Justin Edwards? And he's like, yeah. And he like did the whole scene, like right there in the restaurant on your brother's birthday.
That's amazing. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And I even had some friends like secretly record it and everything. So anyway, I think I've been, if you want to ask me, I've struggled with this answer because I have always agreed with you that the DeLorean is one of the best time machines. But lately I've been thinking that the hot tub there might be more genius than we think, because you know, I don't know if you heard this story, but when John Cusack heard the premise of Hot Tub Time Machine, he didn't even read the script. He just saw the title and who was in it, and he was like, yes. Which is a great story. I don't know if it's true, but that's what I've heard. But I think that there are moments in life that speed up and slow down time, right? And you know, obviously the DeLorean time machine is fictional, right? But I think in real life, there's you know, there's this metaphor that I just love, that when you're with your friends, typically in a hot tub, but not always, and you're having a good time, right? Time speeds up, right? It goes fast, right? And when you're having a hard time, it feels like it's moving slower. And you know, when you're drinking in a hot tub with your buddies, it's like you're traveling to the future, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, time just does weird things. You know, it's funny.
yeah.
So our teammate Andrew was on the podcast earlier this summer, and he has a distinction of being the third longest episode. Not by design, it's just we went and we're like, wait, oh,
challenge accepted.
And so it's just like it went on and on. It was like, and it didn't feel like that at all.
Yeah, exactly.
It was too funny.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right.
I thought it was a good starter. One of the things I like to give people are Apple AirTags. It's a great gift, by the way. It's an awesome gift idea. And the reason why is I like to share with people that this AirTag will literally save you time. Put this on something, and when you lose it, you'll think of me and you'll say, wow, I just saved a lot of time, right? It's funny when you get these AirTags, right? And then you lose something for the first time. And I tell you, I've been using AirTags and tiles forever, and I find my stuff in the craziest places, dude. Like buried down in the laundry. Like I would have never found that. That would be the end of that thing. I would have found it in 2030. And so again, it's that gift of time. It's the one resource that we can't really manipulate, right? It's nothing we can do about it. It's the ultimate. So anyway, I thought that would be a good opener for you.
That's a great opener. Yeah. If we haven't even got into the full conversation, we're talking time machines all of a sudden.
Exactly.
That's too funny. Well, I mean, you've got that time machine behind you, that what's that, salmon colored bike?
Oh yeah, that's by the way, it's a Santa Cruz mountain bike. Exactly.
Nice.
Yep.
So
cool.
So Rob, for our listeners, I'd love for them to learn a little bit about who you are, your story, because you've done a lot. We've gotten to know each other really well from this summer and being on set of 4 Days.
That intense experience.
Yes, intense.
Yeah.
At least we weren't in tents doing that.
Good point. Exactly.
But I mean, you've got a great story and
Yeah.
have done some really cool things. So I'd love for our listeners just to learn your story
Sure.
and hear what it's like to go from where you are to where you are now.
Yeah. So where to begin? Well, I found myself out of college and my first job. So we'll start there. I was in Seattle and I worked for a bank, Washington Mutual Bank. And if anyone has heard of it, they were kind of one of the banks that were instrumental in the 2008 financial crisis.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, I guess it's more of like a point of history, financial history. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I was working there, and I was pretty lucky. I was a software engineer. It was my first job, and I was on a team. I did a lot of different projects. I was really big into just taking on anything that they threw at me. Boy, this interview and drinking is tricky. I'm sitting here like burping and stuff. It's a new challenge. But I really like taking on anything they had. I did a lot of weird projects. Hey Rob, we need to integrate this Access database with this like Word document, or we got to write this program in Perl. And I didn't know any Perl at all, but it was fun. Like you just like do it, and it was an interesting, I think, paradigm shift in software development, because before that, a lot of the engineers kind of would say like, I'm a Fortran developer. That's all I do is Fortran. Don't talk to me if your project has anything other to do with Fortran. You know what I mean? And it was a cool time to be an engineer, because the shift was more towards like, there's going to be a lot of languages. There's this explosion in technology and different types of languages. And the mantra was more like, you got to learn how to learn languages, because there's so many coming, right? And fast forward, that's settled down quite a bit. But I was really lucky to be on a team that was writing in Java, web applications and cloud services in the enterprise, which is incredibly cutting edge now that I look back on it. But when you're a kid and you're 20, you're like, whatever, you don't care. But it ends up being really valuable. And so in a lot of ways, we were like cloud babies. That's all we knew was cloud software, right? This idea of installing something on your machine was very foreign to us. We only knew web-based development. And fast forward, obviously, that turned out to be amazing, because that's what everything is now that we use for the most part. Anyway, this is the best part of the story. So I get to know this Indian dude. His name is Vivek. He's now one of my best friends. And we really hit it off. He loved to go and like bust out of work at like 3 p.m. and drink whiskey all afternoon. And, I was just like kind of some nerdy kid that like, didn't want to piss off my boss or anything. And he would just come over like super loud and like, hey dude, let's get out of here and drink whiskey. I'm like, dude, my boss is like right behind me. What are you doing? And he would just do all this funny stuff to mess with me, And I went over to his computer one day, and you remember Windows NT, right? It had the little taskbar on the bottom.
Yeah.
But the taskbar was just these little tiny slivers, because he had so many applications open. He had so many of them. He must have had like 200 running at the same time. And I was like, Viv, what are you doing, man? There's no way you're doing the same work I am. We're on the same project. What are you working on? And I asked him this like 2 or 3 times, and finally, we came to be good friends, and we went out to the bars, and he was like, look, okay, I got to level with you, Rob. While I'm at work, I've been working on a startup at the same time while I'm at work. I was like, what? You're doing a startup? And, back then, this was, 2003, 2004. It wasn't start doing a startup is very difficult. It's not anything like it is today, right? I mean, nowadays there's so many books, podcasts, and you get so much advice everywhere. It's advice coming out of your ears, right? But back then it was very Wild West. And yeah, so I basically joined that effort. So I started working on it while I was at work. And we figured out all these different ways to access the servers outside the corporate network, and we did all this fun stuff. We had an entire data center in my buddy's garage. We had a T1 line. We had the whole thing because we didn't know about data centers. We didn't even know what that was, right? It was so funny, and we weren't making much money. But soon what happened is we made enough money to for him to quit his job. And by the way, you're probably wondering, well, what was it? It was an online tool, a web-based tool for creating surveys, like SurveyMonkey.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this product is called Question Pro, and they compete with Qualtrics and all these guys, SurveyMonkey, et cetera. But at the time, the first big project was moving these servers into a data center. So that was my first job. I basically went to this small data center called Internap in Seattle, and I mean, it was total mess. I'm trying not to swear here. I mean, we show up at this data center with like these machines we bought at Walmart, right? And they were like, dude, no, that's not how it works here. You need to buy like 1U servers, and they got to fit in this rack. And we were like, what's a rack? The whole thing, right? So around 2007 or so, I quit my job, which was great. It's a great feeling. I always celebrate when people quit their jobs. It's the best, right? And he convinced me to do sales, and I was super opposed to that. I was like, dude, I'm a software engineer. What are you doing putting me on sales, right? It was super scary, like just talking to randos on the from the internet. Like, are you kidding? Like, I can't do that. But it turned out to be the best thing ever. It was the best thing ever, because one of my favorite books of all time, 4 Steps to the Epiphany, talks about this quite a bit. You have when you're doing a startup, you have to learn how to get out and talk to people. So there's I wouldn't say this is exclusive to engineers, but it's a common mindset with software engineers. This idea that I'm just going to build this amazing thing and everyone's just going to come and start using it, right? And I'm going to sit here and polish this thing for months, years, until it's perfect, and then I'm going to like pull back the curtain and it's going to be amazing, right? Well, can you imagine? I mean, that doesn't work in reality, right? You got to go and talk to people, right? You got to go talk to potential customers. You got to ask them one of my favorite questions. Would you use this if I gave it away for free? Right?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody ask that question like in the context you just put it in.
Yeah. Because a lot of people would say, no, it's a huge pain in the ass. I'm not going to use that for free.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a phenomenal question to ask.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're in sales and what your product you have to offer, think about that question. Like if
right.
if it's so great, would people use it if it didn't cost anything?
Right. Yeah. And that's so he's one of it's actually cool. So he's the godfather of Agile, which is, Agile, of course, is, iterative development, test with real people, real customers. There's a lot to Agile, but he was the first one that came up with this idea of, that you are a startup, essentially, is a temporary organization searching for a repeatable business model. Because a really similar common mistake is that people think they're starting a mini company. Right. I'm going to get a website, and I'm going to have a name, and I'm going to get a lawyer, and I'm going to get a trademark, and I'm going to do all this stuff. It doesn't have anything to do with finding out if you have product market fit.
Yep.
Right. It doesn't have anything to do with traction, all those things. Right. So being being on the phones, answering calls and talking to people turned out to be this amazing gift. I will remember this day as clear as anything. When he sent me that text on the first day and he said, okay, you're in the call queue. And he put my cell phone in the call queue, and I was sitting there. I was actually at my girlfriend's house. It's a separate story. And I was the first time I was working from home ever in my life. And it was like the weirdest thing. Like I didn't have an office. I was just working at home, and he put me in the call queue. Kevin, my phone rang off the hook. We got so many calls. It was insane. Like my battery died. I was like, I need to plug in my phone. It was insane. And it was just like, call, you know, because we were big on that. Like, just call, like, just ask us questions, right? And we had a ton of traffic, and you know, it was amazing. So anyway, I did kind of sales and engineering, and kind of moved into product market fit, stuff like that. So that was my first startup. You with me so far?
So far, if I'm tracking, like if I'm going to pull a lesson out of that story, and it's a lesson that I felt like was could be used with 4 days to save the world. Be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And boy, were we uncomfortable. Separate issue. And so, you know, as I was talking to customers, this frustration started to form that I heard from a lot of people, that, you know, you would, you know, surveys are they're temporal. You send them out to people, and you hope that you're hitting them at just the right time, right? Now, who knows when you're ready to fill out a survey? Are you kidding me? Like, first of all, I don't want to fill out a survey. I ran a survey software company. I don't want to fill out I'm like over it. I don't even want to touch those things, right? But as you can imagine, timing is everything. Like when I buy an Apple product, they got me nailed. They know exactly when to send that survey, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's very difficult to get that timing right. And a lot of times it could be at the wrong moment. Like, I want to give feedback on this product. I'm upset about it, or I'm happy about it. Where is the survey? Where I got that email like a couple days ago, but my inbox is a nightmare. I can't find it. I'm out, right? In addition to that, you know, surveys are quantitative, almost, I mean, in the sense that they're helpful that they're quantitative, but at the same time, you lose a lot of context, right? So you'll always, I'm sure you've seen this. You take a survey, and at the end of it, there's an open-ended text field,
Yeah.
right? Give us any additional thoughts, right? And what we were finding is this frustration with those data sets. It was just hard to suss out any trend in the comments. People were reading them one at a time, really. They put an intern on it or something, and they try to use some text analysis tools to figure out, you know, what was going on in those comments. And so we thought, well, what if we launched a new product that was kind of like a combination of an open-ended text survey, and across with, say, like Dig or Reddit style communities where people could vote on other people's comments, right? Which, you know, at the time is pretty revolutionary, right? Because, you know, people don't really want to air out all their dirty laundry, right?
Right.
Because, you know, I don't want customer A to see customer B's responses, right? So that was revolutionary in itself. But, you know, we were really lucky to see the writing on the wall that people are gonna embrace crowdsourcing in some fashion, right? So we hit that pretty well. But also that people are going to expect to be able to participate with the brand directly, right? And if you think about it, like, even you think about it, fast forward to today, you know, you compare like Tesla and GM, right? First of all, do you know who the CEO of GM is?
Nope.
Exactly. But I bet you know who the CEO of Tesla is.
Yeah, he just moved to my state.
Yeah, exactly. Right. By the way, the CEO of GM is Mary Barra. But people expect to interact with these brands on Twitter, right?
Yep.
Directly. Oh yeah, well, I'm gonna, I've tweeted at Elon and had him add stuff to the software, and he did it. It's great. I mean, it's like the best feeling. Do you think if I tweeted at Mary Barra, she'd add like a software update to my? Well, I don't own a Chevy, but if I owned a Chevy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not happening, right? I mean, these customer interactions are very important, right? So anyway, we had this idea, and but we didn't have any customers. But one superpower we had is that we had all those existing people we've spoken to at Question Pro, and guess what? I learned to be very comfortable asking for money, even to the point where I was comfortable asking for money even if I didn't have the feature yet or the thing even built. Imagine a world where so we started IdeaScale, which is basically a SaaS-based product for building these online communities where people can submit an idea and other people can vote on them. That was the early concept. And then a really cool thing happened. I actually, in college, I was obsessed with open source software. I was way into it. I wrote like a senior paper on it. I was like, this is going to change the world, just like when you're a stupid college kid, you think everything's going to change the world. But I was really into it. I actually still have the books from that research, and I absolutely loved it. And we actually knew some of the people that were heavy into the Mozilla Foundation, Brian Bellendorf being one of the big ones there. And they were connected with the Obama administration. Well, actually, they're connected with the campaign. And then, of course, Obama won. And so they were very, that campaign was, skewed very young, very tech savvy. They had a lot of people from, Google, Facebook, actually not from Facebook, mostly from Google and the open source community. And Obama wrote basically an open government letter, essentially, for his first 100 days. He asked that all the major federal agencies in the U.S. government work to be more open and inclusive in their interactions with the general public. And it was just a huge sea change. And what was really smart is the GSA, which is basically the IT department of the federal government. It's like one of these huge agencies you've never heard of, okay?
Yep.
But they did something really smart. They said, okay, look, why is it that agencies aren't using, social media to interact with their constituents, right? And it turned out to be like the stupidest reason ever. It was because of their terms of service, right? So the terms of service said like, oh, we can run ads and do all this stuff, and you can't, the agencies couldn't allow that, right? So this woman, Bev Godwin, was so smart. She went around to every startup, IdeaScale included, and said, hey, let's do a special terms of service for the federal government, and let's break this logjam. Let's get people on let's get these agencies on Twitter, right? Let's get our representatives on Twitter and interacting with the constituents, right? And it was incredible. I mean, it was the coolest thing ever. I got to go to the White House a bunch of times and meet with people and really refine the product. And that was our big breakout moment. That was where I was like, hold on a minute. A couple of years ago, I was some punk in a bank, and now I'm in the White House negotiating a deal with the Obama administration.
That's
it was
funny.
just crazy. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how much we were out of our league. Kevin, it's insane. Like,
well, I mean, you talk about the White House, the most well-known building on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And with the most well-known person on the planet, residing in that building.
We didn't meet Obama, but we did play with his dog, which was awesome.
So a good friend of mine was actually part of both campaigns
cool.
for the president, and he was like the advanced event team So anytime that
Nice.
during the campaign he would go to a new city, he would get there beforehand and work with the Secret Service and the community leaders and things like that.
Yeah.
And so a couple years ago, we were in Oklahoma City, and both of us served on a youth camp board. I met him because they needed counselors. I came on board. He
Yeah.
was in charge of the counselors. And then eventually we got to a point where we teamed up as co-counselors
Sure.
for throughout the week. And one year our group was called the Secret Service. And
Nice.
my friend Adrian actually had the little pins that Secret Service would hand out to allow people into certain areas.
Yeah.
And so because you're not supposed to have them, but I still have mine, and it's hidden somewhere over here in plain sight. That should I ever need to use it, I've got this
awesome.
little Secret Service, and it's like this big. It like clips
Nice.
onto your lapel, and that's how the Secret Service knows like how far you can get into the perimeter. And like this particular one, he said, is like I could pretty much walk up to the president.
It's amazing. I love it. It is a really cool experience being there and like seeing the history. And it's like, I remember at one moment, I think we were looking at Lincoln's plateware or something. And it's just one of those things where you feel like you shouldn't be there.
It's a weird thing, especially when you see. So I've been in Fort Worth this week, and the hotel I stayed at is right across the street from the Hilton Fort Worth, which is where John F. Kennedy gave his last public speech.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so and there's pictures and a monument out there where you see like where he was in front of like this particular window in the building. It's like, it feels weird to be in front of history like that.
Yeah. No, it's great. So we started working with these federal agencies, all the 13 of the major federal agencies, and we were way out of our league. We were freaking out. Our hair was on fire. We weren't paid very much for it, and conventional wisdom, it seemed like this was a really bad idea for many reasons. One of the big ones was because most software startups weren't really selling to the federal government, right?
How do you manage something that big?
Yeah, at our side, I mean, we're not Lockheed Martin. Are you kidding me? We're not making missiles, right? It's just so we had no idea how to do federal contracting, nothing. There are a couple other interesting things that happened along the way. We met a lot of great people, by the way. A lot of the people from the Obama campaign still work in a lot of those agencies, and they're just wonderful, wonderful people. Such a great network of friends. And it was just cool to see that kind of be on the front lines of this kind of technology sea change. And I started to learn more about it. It's kind of interesting. I think conventional wisdom says that, government isn't very cutting edge when it comes to software. But, if you look historically, they were actually one of the early adopters, right? They were buying mainframes way before anybody else was, right? And gained a lot of efficiency from it. And I think it's kind of comes in waves, right? And it was just cool to see this like reinvigoration of all this technology and software happening. So let's see. So we started doing that, and we were really lucky to meet another good friend of mine, Josh Folk. He was a White House intern at the time, and we came to meet him, and we just said, look, we have no idea how to navigate government, and we need someone just full-time, boots on the ground, to just figure this out for us. And fast forward to today, 50% of our revenue is federal government, state and local, and international governments, all using IdeaScale to engage with their employees or their citizens, their constituents in some cases as well. And so it was like probably one of the best decisions we ever made was to double down and say, you know what, it just felt like the right thing to do. Right. It felt like the right thing to increase engagement, with with citizens, right? And try to get people more involved in these federal agencies. Again, either internally or externally. So that was that part of the story. So that was pretty crazy. There's more along the way. I mean, I got to beat Andrew.
Yeah,
we got to stress this out.
I mean, I shouldn't have brought that part up. That's funny.
I know, exactly. So where are we? I think it would be a good time to tell you a little more about what it is.
Yeah,
what
I'm
our
sitting
platform
here,
is.
Because when I read the about section on IdeaScale, it says, the largest cloud-based innovation software platform in the world with more than 25,000 customers and 4.5 million users. The software allows organizations to involve the opinions of public and private communities by collecting their ideas and giving users a platform to vote. The ideas are evaluated, routed, and implemented, making IdeaScale the engine of crowd-powered innovation. Please unpack that for me.
Sure. I'll give you I'm going to give you the leaders and loggers version, which I think arguably is better.
There you go.
It's more apropos to this audience. So have you ever noticed that when you're talking about an idea that you're really excited about, it's not at work? Right? You know what I'm saying? Right? You're at the bar, you're at the coffee shop, right? Maybe you're smoking some weed, whatever.
You're solving the world's problems away from the office where all the world's problems aren't solved to begin with.
Right. And so that's, in a nutshell, what we're trying to solve, is that why we constantly ask ourselves that question. Why is it that the best ideas happen not in the place where you want them to be happening, which is the workplace, right? You come up with them in the shower while you're driving, right? And so let's nibble around the problem a little bit, right? Like, for one thing, when you're at the bar with your friends, your guard is down, right?
Right.
And that's kind of one of the biggest issues with creativity in the workplace, is that there's all this hesitation because you're afraid of what your boss is going to say. You're afraid what your coworkers are going to say, because you know what? A lot of the best ideas are controversial. You work at GM and you're like, hey, you know what? We should do ride sharing, right? Everyone's like, what? Are you crazy? We make cars. Why would we do ride sharing, right? That's the biggest miss ever, right?
Yeah.
Because it's controversial, right? Yeah, Kevin's shaking his head. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's the first thing, is we want to have that excitement. We want to capture that excitement when you write down an idea on a cocktail napkin, and lower those barriers, right? Because the other thing that's happening is that organizations traditionally have a very deep hierarchy.
Yeah.
Lots of managers, not a lot of doers, right?
Yep.
Frankly, not a lot of creativity. And you have the innovator's dilemma, right? So have you ever heard that phrase?
Yes.
Innovator's dilemma? Yeah.
I mean, I struggle with that as someone who, on a strengths-based assessment, like ideation is at the top of my list. Mm-hmm. Like, and if I don't take time to like lock myself in a room full of whiteboards, for an hour a week, like I don't know what to do.
Yeah. But you get the problem where these big companies have so much middle management that, the middle management is essentially the de-risking machine.
Yep.
Right. So they're going to filter out all the ideas. So I think back to my days at the bank. I remember coming up with ideas all the time, and it felt like the solution, the filtering mechanism was like, well, do they have seniority? Which is basically, some people call that the Hippo model for ideation. It's called the highest paid person's opinion. Right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. But an idea doesn't care where it came from. It stands on its own, right?
Yep.
And so what we're trying to do is democratize that process a little bit, right? And flatten the organization and say, hey, you know what? Doesn't matter where the idea is coming from. We're going to help you bring a process for evaluating ideas. And by the way, this isn't rocket science. It's not that hard. It's really about organizing it and socializing it, right? So the other piece that we try to sprinkle in is engagement, and that's basically Latin for, using what the kids are used to, which is, a social media kind of environment like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But instead of sharing cat videos, right, we're sharing ideas on how we can improve the organization.
Yep.
Right. And we can talk about it in an environment where it's like, it's safe, right? It's fun. And so a lot of what IdeaScale is essentially a community of people that want to participate in the innovation process within a company. So it's actually, it's really fun. It's like the best job ever, honestly.
So now that I fully understand a little bit of what you do, it's funny. So several years ago, I created a Facebook page specifically to leverage the conversation to attract Chipotle to West Texas, where I live.
Oh, interesting.
And
love me some Chipotle. Go on.
Chipotle is phenomenal. And because out here in the heart of West Texas in the Permian Basin, we're not Dallas Fort Worth. We're not these big Texas metropolitans, and so to get new things, it's tough because we're literally 5 hours from in any direction to any of the major cities. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to leverage this social account. People keep talking about it when they go to Dallas or when they go to Austin. It's like, hey, I wish we had this place here. And so we created this page and it grew to the point where real estate developers saw it and used it to get Chipotle to come to Midland, and as part of that process. And so I'm sitting here thinking, like, this is kind of what I've been doing with this. So then after the success of that, when people kept saying, hey, can you bring this place and this place and this place?
Well, wait, hold on. So should you have a Chipotle there?
We do too.
Nice.
and I was credited. In fact, when the newspaper ran like the front page article, and the developer and the people from Chipotle said, we saw this page.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the deciding factor, was like, we didn't realize that people were doing it. So we created another page that was going to be a more holistic, say, hey, let's target these restaurants and retail and entertainment places that we'd love to see out here.
Sure.
And to your point, going back to, getting companies to engage. So this week, this last week, the big news is that we're getting a Chuy's Tex-Mex, which is a big deal out here. And,
interesting.
And people have always been asking for it. So I tweeted to Chuy's, said, hey, rumor is that y'all are coming to Midland, Odessa in 2022.
Sure.
And they responded. And so I took that screenshot, posted, and said, hey, Chuy's is coming to Midland. And that had a reach of 110,000 in a matter of 72 hours. And the page that I've launched, it's almost 4 years old. It'll be four years in March of this next year. But 20,000 people follow that page. And I've been able to leverage that page in the conversations to talk to people like Topgolf and Dave & Buster's and these big businesses. Costco was going to come here pre-pandemic, and since then, they've kind of put all of those things on hold. But it's doing exactly what I think your platform does in a very crude way.
Yeah, totally. Now I'm curious, are you like kind of a god when you go into the Chipotle in your town? So we're like, dude, there's Kevin.
So what's funny was the week they opened, so they had a soft launch, just to kind of get the bugs out and help employees actually train with live customers. but it was by invitation only. The GM actually reached out to me before they opened, and they had these what I called golden tickets, because it's kind of what they were. Like you had to have one to come in, and they had 5 openings, a lunch and a dinner leading up before the launch.
Sure.
And they gave me like 100 to give away. And so like I'm like using them like Willy Wonka and hiding them in places and posting it online. Hey, here's where you can find this one or that one, and made a game of it. And so, yeah, every time I walk into Chipotle, like I never have to pay for guac at my local Chipotle.
Which is the most valuable.
That's the most valuable.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And so it's just, it's funny. Like people know me for these things, and and it's leveraged so many opportunities to talk to people about social collaboration.
Yeah. Well, I love there's this story about, and as I've listened to your episodes, like there's an interesting narrative around you doing essentially like economic development. You're like a one-man economic development shop.
It was like, because the biggest complaint about living in West Texas is you live in West Texas. And it's like, I can sit here and complain about living where I live and do nothing about it. Or I can try to make it something better. Even if I, get an opportunity to go someplace else, I've always grown up. I was with the mentality of, leave a place better than you found it.
Yep. Exactly.
And so, while I'm here and this is home, I mean, I'm born and raised here, I'm going to make every opportunity to make it not feel like, we're another hole in the wall that you just, drive down I-20 and happen just to stop for the bathroom for.
I mean, I absolutely think we need to change that narrative. Like, you grow up in a small town and you leave and you forget about it. And I actually love my small town. I grew up in Northern New York, and I still go there every summer. I have a summer place there, and I absolutely love it. And I have to say, I am so inspired by what you've done just on your own in Midland, Texas. I just think it is so cool. And I'm actually wondering, like, what do you think about, it seems like there's a migration to small towns happening right now.
There is. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't need the big office buildings anymore. Totally. If the pandemic has taught us anything, is that we can be efficient without having to have so much real estate.
Right.
There's still always going to be a need for physical locations and places for teams to collaborate and meet. And just some jobs just don't work in a remote. And that's only because automation hasn't caught up to those jobs yet. I was giving in my speech this week talking about business ethics and how the fact that over the next 20 years, nearly 1 out of every 2 jobs in the US is going to be driven by AI. And
it's crazy.
And so I think for a lot of people, they are looking at, okay, if I'm not in the big city where, for the pandemic, that's where most of the concentration of big cases has been. So let me retreat to smaller communities where the chance of getting COVID is smaller because there's less people. And it's like, and I think part of it is we need a sense of community. And you think about small town America, like people, everybody knows everybody. I've been watching Gilmore Girls with my fiance for the last couple of months, and because I've never watched it before, but I think about Stars Hollow and Gilmore Girls and just that the community there. And it's like I think people are needing that, especially where the global narrative has been very back and forth at each other's throats, because we've been in a weird like political season for a while.
Yes,
where
it is,
where empathy has been kind of left out. It's like, we're all in this together. April of last year was like, we're all in this together. And now it's like, if if I say this, something, topic A, and you don't agree with topic A because you agree with topic B, it's like we must be enemies all of a sudden instead of.
But I'm curious, like, don't you think, I've been on a Facebook, Instagram diet, and everyone loves to brag about this, but I won't say how long. I've been doing it for a pretty long time. And I just got my wife on it too, like 6 months ago. And I mean, this is very apropos. I mean, that Facebook is getting nailed on this topic right now. That, I just wonder, I mean, I think a lot of this polarization is really driven by the algorithm. And, a lot of that, if you write a news article, it's gotta be negative, right? Or else if you're not getting that traffic, you're not getting any money and you're not selling ads. It's this whole ad-driven marketplace. And the more you learn about these algorithms, the outrage factor is what they're optimizing for, right? Because it gets you that dopamine hit, right?
You're right. I've got a friend of mine who grew up here. He now lives in the Dallas area.
Yeah.
And for a lot of areas, we're pretty much in the center politically. And he's been a talking head on numerous news channels for a number of years, but recently he signed a contract with Newsmax to be a featured talking head. And I remember sitting there talking to him because I was like, well, how did you get into doing that? What does that look like? What's the whole process to be, on a national news network? And because I said, I don't ever see you act this way except here. And he goes, for the longest time, I tried to play the middle, and my agent finally just told me, it said, you're going to start losing opportunities unless you pick a side. Said,
oh my God.
He said, you got to pick left or right.
Jeez.
You've got to be a hero on one side and a villain to the other. It doesn't mean that you can't have an opportunity to go on, since he's leaned more right, doesn't mean he can't go on something like CNN.
Yeah.
But if he goes on CNN, he's gonna play the villain role versus the hero role. And so I'm just like, wow. I guess I don't really need to be a talking head on television as much as I thought I did.
Right.
Let me stay in my lane of sitting in the middle. That's why, I'm really hopeful and wanting Matthew McConaughey to run for governor of Texas, because from a political standpoint, there's so many things that he likes to sit in the middle.
He does a great job of that, by the way.
I mean, he does a phenomenal job of it. And to use a phrase that I learned over the summer. So Midland, Texas is home to President George W. Bush. And so I was in Dallas and I thought, I want to go see the Bush Library. And he had his new painting exhibit out of Mini One talking about the immigration story, American immigrant, and which is a phenomenal story just to see all these different people. And in the exhibit, they had this group called Common Ground. And so what they did was talking about, hey, we need to find a common ground to solve the immigration issues. And the way they explained it was both the left and the right are trying to solve the same thing, where they just have different points of view on how to solve that. And so if we can pull back and find a moment of common ground where we both say, hey, you know what, that makes sense. Let's start here.
Yeah, sure. Exactly.
And so for me, the whole idea of common ground and working through, all these different things, because I mean, you mentioned, Barack Obama as president, and George W. Bush being before him, and two fundamentally ideologically different men. But when you look at them now, and what I love about most presidents post-presidency is their willingness to find common ground for the greater good. I mean, you look at
I mean, we have one outlier, recent former president, but generally, yes. Yeah.
I mean, you look at George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton and their partnership to solve, things like in Haiti or when they're
yeah.
and even now,
Well, Jimmy Carter is a great example. I mean, he's
very
killing
great,
it. Yeah, I mean,
very great example of
yeah,
hey, let's find those common ground initiatives,
yeah,
work through them.
yeah.
And so I'm trying to think, how do I tie all that back to IdeaScale?
You don't have to.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to like.
Well, I think what's interesting is our discourse is I think we forget how much of our discourse is online now, and it's the algorithm. We don't want to admit that the algorithm is controlling our discourse, but as we learn more and as these revelations come out, we realize that it really is.
Yeah.
And the algorithm, if you're running an ad-driven model, is going to drive negative discourse. It's going to award negative discourse. And I think a lot of people forget, we talk about our free speech and how does that apply to these private companies? Does it even matter? It doesn't, by the way. They can do whatever they want. But I think we forget that it's not just your right to post something on these platforms, but it's also they're controlling the magnification. But at the end of the day, that's what everyone cares about. That's what everyone's addicted to, right? That's the dopamine hit. It's like, oh yeah, I got 100 likes or whatever on this meme that I posted, right? That got everybody angry, or it was funny or whatever. It was a cheap shot. And it's, people don't do that in real life, right? I mean, when you're actually talking to each other, I mean, it's totally different. And it makes me think one of my favorite things about Canadian politics, Canadian government, they do this thing called informed participation. And I have some friends that actually run these projects. It's really fascinating. So by law, the government actually has to survey the citizens and get a certain percentage of people to participate. But the process at which they survey is really cool. So they'll ask a question first, and then they have to actually inform the respondent on the topic, and then ask the question again after they've been informed, and actually measure, the change in opinion. So I don't know, this like should Canada participate in the Iraq War? And you give your answer, and then they'll say, well, our participation is actually humanitarian. This is what we're doing, and these are all the things the government has been doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they ask the question again, and they measure, not just that change, but also like try to find out, did people even know anything about that topic? Right? Because actually there's some great, I mean, of course, I could have a field day with this. We could talk about this all day, but I love these academic papers where they measure how informed certain audiences are. Like the extreme example is, I don't know if you ever seen these where they measure like how informed Fox News viewers are. I know it's probably controversial for your audience, but but you can pick any cohort, right? And it's pretty fascinating to see like how much of this discourse is actually educated in any real world consequences. But it does have a lot of implications for what we do at IdeaScale, not to make it about me, but because a lot of companies are still quite afraid to open up the conversation to the general public or to the audience. One of my favorite stories is we got this really cool opportunity to meet to pitch Nintendo. Speaking of your beer, and it was awesome to go to Tokyo, by the way. If you ever get a chance, you should definitely do it. This is an amazing experience. But we went out to their headquarters, and by the way, this is so funny when you pitch to a company in Japan, you have to show up like an hour early. That's their big thing. So you show up an hour early and you're all prepped. Like, I mean, my style is like 5 minutes before the meeting. You show up, kind of, it's like American style, whatever. So I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs for an hour, like, and everything's all set up. You print out your slides and they're all like perfectly set out for each person. And, you set everything out and you hand your business card and you bow and all this stuff. And we gave our whole presentation and we were pitching them on this idea of, creating an IdeaScale community for Nintendo gamers, like Nintendo fans. And we did the whole thing and they said, and they're very agreeable generally, almost no matter what you say, which is just kind of a challenge doing business there. And the guy gets up and he says, are you crazy? Like, do you know how rabid our fan base is? Like, these guys, if you open up and give them any space to participate, they will go wild with it. Like it's interesting. Like there is definitely a pretty serious cultural pushback to connecting consumers or fans with each other, right? Because you don't know where it's going to go, right? I mean, it is a little bit unknown to a certain extent. Now, granted, we do a lot of coaching to help people try to drive the narrative towards one particular discussion. And you want to make it clear, like, look, this isn't a complaint box. This is here to submit. If you want to file a bug, go over here. But if you want to give us an idea and on this particular set of topics, this is the place to do that, right? So you want to drive the narrative, of course. But what's interesting is I always like to point out, look, this conversation is going to happen whether you like it or not. I mean, there's so many tools out there. I can go out on Twitter and complain about my flight on, that I just had on, Delta or whatever. And people are going to see that either way. But if I give them a place to do that in a more constructive environment, I might be able to change that narrative a little bit, right?
Yep.
And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to drive that narrative and give people a place to have those conversations that they otherwise would have anyway on a forum or Yelp or wherever else, right? So it's pretty interesting. And it's actually funny, I don't know if I told you, I'm in Berkeley. Did I mention that on the show?
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
mentioned
sure.
a couple of times.
Okay. Well, it's funny because a little bit of history about Berkeley, we are this is the birth of the free speech movement, right? And this is where, it sounds silly, but, back in the day in the 50s, like it was kind of controversial to stand up on a soapbox. And that's actually what they used to do. They would stand on a box up on campus and speak their mind. And they would get in trouble for it.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that crazy?
It's one of those things that I think as a leader, to allow those around us to have a voice and be heard.
Yes.
And having the emotional intelligence to weed through, noise versus actual constructive thoughts.
Yes, exactly.
And whether it's, free speech, anybody can say anything they want. Nobody's going to stop you there. But, common sense
yes,
would dictate that there are consequences for saying whatever you want.
Right.
And some thoughts are rewarded, others not so much. And I think in a leadership application of all of this, I think it just goes to, if you want to be a dynamic leader, and
Sure.
want to be someone that is open to 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 leading people and getting people to follow, because all about um, vulnerability. And this is a very vulnerable moment, to your point with, the people at
Yeah.
Nintendo, like to say, like, are we going to allow a moment of vulnerability to allow our fan base to open up? And that's a scary thought, to say
Yes.
we're gonna give them space to speak. But I'm thinking here, like, why wouldn't you? Like,
Right.
these are the people who are going to continually to buy and support you. So as a leader, like, why not dive into, hey, this is the people who are going to carry our brand.
Yeah.
You've got
And to yes on that, I mean, the 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 common narrative around innovation is that it's invention, right? It's like one guy came up with this, or girl came up with this thing, and blew everybody's mind, right? I'm gonna put on my black turtleneck and my Steve Jobs glasses, and I am just gonna anoint this idea as amazing and bring it to market, right? Well, that's not how it works. And actually, if you really think about it, my favorite definition is that innovation is not invention. It's actually the work involved in bringing something to market, because that's actually really hard to do. That encompasses a lot of the principles that we talked about. The biggest one being get out of the office, talk to people, right? Figure out, I mean, would you even use this thing if it was free? And actually, it's funny, like if you look in history, I mean, like Edison, for example, everyone loves to talk about Edison. I mean, do you know how many people were employed under him to come up with ideas? I mean, his failure rate was insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge, right? And his approach to innovation was to just crank up the failures. Like if
Yeah.
I didn't fail, 100, 200 times a day, we didn't do any work,
Yeah.
right? And a lot, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you know this, but Nikola Tesla actually worked for Edison as one of the inventors, right? And so my advice is always like, look, we're in the Bay Area, so we talk about this all the time. Like, you got to celebrate the failure. You got to just try stuff like crazy, and that's it's funny. I feel like our theme is building so well, and we didn't even plan for it. But it part of failure is being uncomfortable with trying these things.
Yep.
Right. And putting yourself out there. And by the way, just to tie it back up too, I give a lot of credit to my co-founder Vivek, because he pushed me. He always pushed me to be incredibly uncomfortable. And I don't know what it is about him, but it's like, he's, by the way, he's an immigrant, and he came to the US and started a lot of companies, actually employed a lot of people. It's incredible. And what I've learned, I have a lot of friends who have immigrated here. Like, it really is a different mindset. A lot of immigrants have this really awesome mindset where they're not afraid to just go for it, put themselves out there. I mean, there's a reason why immigrants start companies high more than any other demographic, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
clear. I mean, they are just so good at that. And I'm always trying to impart that knowledge to as many people as I can, and like take that first incremental step, right? You don't have to take a big step. It's just take that small step, whatever it is, and get out there and take that first step. So yeah, be uncomfortable. I love that.
It's such a great thing. I think for a lot of
Yeah.
people, whether they are currently doing something that they don't really enjoy and are trying to figure out that next step, sometimes you just have to get out there, whether that's a full-on burn the boats moment,
Yes.
or taking a baby step and just kind of seeing where it goes.
Yes.
But you're not going to get to where you're wanting to go by being comfortable at any moment. When I was at my previous employer, I had a colleague who oversaw a large territory of where we were. And he would always tell people, I want, to your point about failure, he's like, I want people to fail and I want them to fail fast. In fact, if they have an idea, I may know that it's a bad idea because I've been there,
Sure.
but I
Right.
don't need to tell them that. I need them to experience it. And so usually if they say, hey, can I try this? I'm like, yeah, let's get in the car and go. I'm going to make them drive and I'm going to put my foot down on the pedal all the way to the ground. And
Sure.
if we run it into that tree, because we were going too fast, my first response to them to know whether or not they're going to make it is to see their reaction to hitting the tree. If they're going to sit there
Yes.
dazed and try it again, then I know I need to move on from them. But if
Yeah,
they get up
sure.
and assess the the scene of the action and say, okay, that didn't work. How do I tweak this so we don't hit the tree again?
Right.
And be ready to go again. He said, those are the people I know are going to be successful.
Yeah.
The people
Yep.
who assess the failure, quickly learn from it and say, okay, this didn't work.
Yeah.
Here's the part that didn't work. Let's try it again. And so he was always a big proponent of fail often and fail fast.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing is, I think the common narrative is like, oh, quit your job and start a new company, right? Do a startup. But I always like to remind people, don't forget entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Which is this huge growing field. By the way, we do a lot of work with entrepreneurship. We want to encourage these companies to start inside companies. That's a very new, that's a big insight, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because what's happening is, I'm sure you know the story, like a big company buys some little startup and then the startup dies. Like the product gets terrible, right? Like great products go to big companies to die. Like we're trying to change that, and we're trying to understand why that dynamic happens. It gets caught up in process and all kinds of stuff, right? It's no fun. So a lot of companies are trying to reinvent themselves inside the company by creating these incubators where employees go and learn how to be an entrepreneur inside their company, right? So they have all these resources, right? And they try to create these spaces where new ideas can flourish. And that's actually one of our biggest goals. A lot of people come to us and they say, well, we want to get X number of ideas to become new lines of business. And it's like, okay, slow your roll. That's great that you want to do that, but a better way to think about it is, I want to get more ideas to prototype, right? I want to what does that prototype look like? It could be, 3D print the product, build it out of Legos, right? Or write a business case. It's as simple as just writing a business case, simple business plan. And you can use all kinds of models for that, like design thinking, business model canvas, etc. But it's a much more realistic goal for a lot of people, right? It's like, look, I just want to get that to prototype. Have you ever heard of the Google 10% program? 10% time? Yeah. That's actually, so that's where Gmail was invented. So 3M runs a similar program, and that's how they came up with the Post-it note.
Yeah,
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing, but it's a great way for leaders to say, look, we're going to create these cultures where we're not getting rid of our best people because what they have doesn't fit our model. No, it's investing in our people to say, hey, we know you're going to have good ideas and we want to partner with you in these ideas because it may make a great sense for us, because you may come up with a new product line for us.
Yep.
Or you may have a business that's completely different from us, but you know what? We want to be a partner in that and not necessarily just gobble up something that doesn't fit our needs.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And we want to, I brought that example of GM and doing the ride sharing. We want to encourage those conversations and those ideas. Like, imagine you worked at Blockbuster and you were like, hey, you know what? We should start mailing DVDs. Right? That would have saved them. I mean,
Yeah, it was.
it's crazy. We're actually just talking about this. I'm in an investment group, and you know, it's so funny. Like people, it's really hard for people to imagine some of these big brands completely going out of business, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm curious if I went back, 15 years ago or whatever, and said, "Hey, Kevin, Blockbuster's going to go out of business. Everyone, everyone's going to sign up for this new company called Netflix, and they're going to mail the DVDs for you." You probably would have like punched me in the face, be like, "Get out of here."
It's fun. It's funny. So it's funny you bring this example up. So
Yeah,
one of my favorite podcasts to listen to when I'm traveling
yeah.
is the Office Ladies podcast, Jenna
Oh
Fisher
my
and Angela
God,
Kinsey. And
I've never heard of it. Sounds amazing.
did you ever grow up? Did you watch The Office?
Oh, you mean The Office?
The Office, yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome. I didn't even know
The
about this. Go
The
ahead.
Office. So Angela
Sure,
Kinsey, who plays Angela, Jenna Fisher, who plays Pam,
sure.
they're sitting there, and rewatching all the episodes and giving commentary to it.
Sure.
And they were talking about Netflix, and just and so they asked a question: when did you stop getting the DVDs and only
Sure.
doing
The
the
streaming.
streaming?
Sure.
And they couldn't remember. Like it was just, it's felt like it's been part of what we do, what they've done for so long. Like that, who
Yeah.
I mean, I have not bought a DVD or a Blu-ray or any of these, and I can't remember. I mean, I have to go look at my bookshelf to see like what was the last one that I bought, because I can get
Sure.
them all streamed to my TV or whatnot. And if I'm strolling, Walmart, and I see these, $5 DVD bins, I'm like, I mean, part of me wants to go through it just to see what's in there.
Yeah,
But
totally.
it's like I don't even use a DVD player anymore.
But it's a technology change, but I think there's also a pretty interesting narrative around obviously disruption.
Right.
Like, so this is the debate we have is, it is shocking how fast these companies implode. I mean, I don't know if you've read the BlackBerry story. It's really fascinating. When they were one of the first ones to take apart an iPhone. They took that thing apart. It's 2007, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, this is alien technology. It was unrecognizable. They could not understand, how did someone make a phone that can handle this much bandwidth? Because at the time you couldn't actually push that much bandwidth over the air. I mean, this was the leading smartphone company in the world, and they took it apart and they thought it was alien technology. And the guys that took it apart already knew that BlackBerry was done. The problem is no one would listen to them. That's the interesting part of the story, because they took it apart and they were like, we need to polish our resumes. Right? Right? But management didn't, it's willful ignorance, right? I guess. I mean, they didn't want it. They just couldn't admit that it was going to happen. And what we're debating, as a group is like, what are those signals? Are they financial? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a management thing? What we're obsessed right now is car companies, because it does not look good for the major auto companies right now. It's like a fascinating topic. I mean, and I'm wondering your thoughts about it. I mean, there's a lot of debt on the balance sheet of these companies, right? There's a lot of dogma, right? They are weighted down by these large external organizations like, the UAW, stuff like that, for better or worse. Like, they're resistant to change, right?
Yep.
You have dealerships that aren't aren't ready to make the transition, right, to EVs. They're not interested in that. It is a really fascinating business problem.
So
right?
what comes to my mind, especially in
Yeah.
this example. So did you watch the movie Ford versus Ferrari? Came out. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
it was a
Great
phenomenal
movie.
There's a scene where Matt Damon's character is sitting in Mr. Ford's office.
Yeah.
And they're debating why they should continue this project, and he makes a mention about this red folder that's being passed around.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that.
And it's a great scene. It's one of the, I think, most watched on YouTube, in particular to
Interesting.
this movie. And so Carol Shelby, who Matt Damon is playing, makes a comment to Mr. Ford and says, as I've been sitting here, sitting out in your lobby and sitting in your office, I've watched this little red folder be passed around between 9 different hands before it got to you, and probably before it got up to here, who knows how many number of hands it changed before going up 18 flights of floors.
Sure.
And calling out the bureaucracy of the decision-making process of, if you're going to beat Ferrari, you got to get rid of all this BS of bureaucracy in order to to make it matter. And so to your point about the auto industry. So out here in West Texas, we're the heart of the oil and gas industry.
Sure.
In America. And so, the lifeblood of what makes this community go, literally, money doesn't grow on trees, it comes out of the ground.
Yeah. And by the way, you literally can't buy a Tesla in Texas. It's illegal.
It's stupid. It's stupid.
To your point. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's stupid. But not only do you have the bureaucracy within the automotive industry, and there are some that are doing they're being dragged kicking and screaming, but they're making the changes. Like I will to Ford's point, the Ford F-150 Lightning electric truck. That's a phenomenal vehicle. Like, why not do that to all of the other vehicles and just retrofit current vehicles to electric vehicles and make them work? Because everybody out here drives a pickup. The number of white pickup trucks that are in Texas outnumbers, I think, the herd of cattle.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like, this is a great vehicle, but it goes even further beyond, because the infrastructure is not in place to transition to electric vehicles. So I've got a good friend of mine who has bought 3 repair shops here.
I remember you telling me this.
To work on vehicles. And what he's doing is literally converting them to be the Tesla of machine shops.
EV repair.
Because none of there aren't any that do that. And not that EV vehicles break down, but it's most of the people in that field, because it's the automotive industry is the last big industry to be unregulated as a whole. Now, with the reset coming, with the emissions mandates that are set to say by 2030 or 2035, I think there will be a reset that then begins to regulate the industry at that point to fall in line. But everybody who's been in the industry up until this point are just kind of biding their time, and then when that comes, there will be the mass retirement, not the mass resignation that we're seeing. We'll see the mass retirement out of the automotive industry, because people aren't willing to transition to that unless they're smart enough to see, hey, you know what? I have a skill set that is usable for this. And that was my part of my conversation this week at the conference, talking about, well, what does good business ethics look like in the age of AI as it results to replacing people, to the point about, the office and a paper company. Why was Michael Scott so passionate about keeping a small, Midwestern paper company afloat versus going to a web-based application like his protege Ryan Howard, trying to make that but what Michael ultimately believed in is that business is about people.
Mhm.
And so we're in a situation with the automotive industry, and for what y'all are discussing, is nobody's taken really the people aspect into it and say, hey, how do we train all of these people who have these skills to transition them to be able to do electric vehicles, because automation is going to remove a lot of these jobs. So how do we keep these people employed and where they're making good money and using a skill set that is can be transferable? Or if it's not transferable, how come we're not investing into these people to train them, whether it's in how to run these things, or coding, or whatever it may be, to make that transition?
Right.
And ultimately, I think the downfall of these big companies, it's not going to be financial, and I don't think it's going to be cultural. It's just going to be leadership just not wanting to change.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's, fun fact that I think I've heard numbers like there's almost 100 times fewer moving parts going from a gasoline engine to an electric vehicle. Well, the implications are pretty shocking. I mean, you don't need to do as many repairs, and when you drive an EV, I mean, you barely even use the brakes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of funny. Like, it's one pedal driving, and the motor does all the braking for you, and the brakes you barely wear them out, and that has implications for the entire industry, right? I mean, these dealerships, the majority of their money is actually in service. That's where their profit is, right? And if that goes away, that's scary, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's wild. I'm kind of curious about AI. So you were talking about AI, and I'm wondering where you are as far as policy around AI. And I know, like, Bill Gates is pushing for a basically kind of like an AI tax, essentially. Like, if you replace a person with a robot, there would be a tax for that robot, and that would go back to people. I don't know. Have you heard of anything like that? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I haven't read much into that, but it does bring up, going back to what I was,
Yeah.
An ethical dilemma of, we want to make sure that we're taking care of people.
Sure. Yeah.
And to think through, like, how do we train and transition people to those roles? So, like, my story of why climate change,
Sure.
of wanting to
Yeah.
come onto it, because the people out here, I am fearful, are going to wake up one day without a job.
Yep.
And my community, the economic output of what this community is going to dry up. And this will be the largest ghost town besides Detroit, Michigan.
Yep.
And so, because we claim to be, the energy capital of America, why not take those transferable skills from oil and gas and put that to other energy sources?
Now, isn't Texas the
We're
second or
we are
largest wind
we're the largest
producer?
largest
Oh,
wind
largest.
producer.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if it was Iowa or Texas.
Yeah, largest wind producer. In fact, one of the largest wind farms in America is about an hour drive from where
Okay.
I am.
Yep.
We have 340 days plus of sunshine, so why not, invest in solar?
It's a no-brainer.
And in fact, somebody I was reading the other day, Best Buy
Sure.
just invested in a solar farm 30 miles from my house.
Interesting.
And then you've got, because it's stupid hot in Texas, why not invest in not only in solar but thermal resources? In Texas, there's only one natural lake. Everything else is man-made. So you have all these hydro electric dams.
Oh, yeah.
So you've got that aspect.
Sure.
So there's a lot of different things that can be done in transferable skills. And you're talking about carbon capture technologies and doing so many different things. So it's like, if I'm one of these companies, what do I do to invest? And I think one of the ones that's really intriguing to me right now is Royal Shell out of the Netherlands. So they just sold off the remaining acreage that they own in the Permian Basin.
I saw that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're getting out of this. And so how does a company that has been built around oil and gas transition to survive, no longer, being in that? And to me, it's like, the dilemma of Tony Stark and Stark Industries. We're a weapons manufacturer that doesn't manufacture weapons anymore. So what do we do?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting. If you look where the puck is going, we have this perfectly good fission reactor in the sky, right? That's the sun, and it transmits energy remotely. And if you think about it from a first principles perspective, that's what Elon always says. It's actually a really good insight. Why can't we just deliver that radiation turns into electricity right to your home, right? And just throw it on your roof, right?
Yeah.
And do it right there. But yeah, I am really fascinated in that transition, right? And that's the theme here, right? It's like, who are the winners and losers here, right? And can these companies transition fast enough? And I'm really curious about it. I don't know if it's possible. That's my fear.
And I think that's ultimately what's going to be the downfall, is how quickly can you transition? How well are you ready to pivot? And to our friends at 4 Days Save the World, who were on the Reinventing the Education System team, I remember visiting with one of their team, Ted Wakeman, about and so Ted and I talked about what does it look like from an educational standpoint, because this ties into this very, very well, where we've used an education system that was built upon the needs of the Industrial Revolution 100 years ago. And that's, and that goes back to, we talked about, these hierarchies, because we needed that. We just needed people as resources. That's where the term human resources came from. Was they were literally a tool that just happened to be humans. And so how do we manage those? And as you look at the transition for some companies from how things were done 100 years ago to how things are done today, and even how do we prepare for the next, not 100 years, but how do we just prepare for the next 10 years? And the things that we've been doing are so far behind in preparing people for the roles that we don't even know that we need yet.
Right.
And so it goes back to, when talking with Ted, we gotta stop teaching based off the way we've been teaching, because that's not going to work. It kind of goes to a free thinking movement of, let people learn where they want to learn and invest in where they want to be, and utilize those strengths and those resources and funnel that to where it needs to go. We're always going to need certain aspects to say, hey, certain parts of society are going to be at certain levels. It's just
absolutely.
It's just how things have been designed. Not that there's anything fair about it. It's just the way things are. Right. But to the automation point, those easy things will eventually be automated. I was talking in my session how much it drives me crazy to sit in the drive-through line when I've ordered off a mobile app, and there are still people who are ordering with the person standing in the line and thinking like, you idiot, there's an app, use it. You can bypass all of this. Let's speed it up. I want my chicken sandwich.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny how the pandemic has pulled forward a lot of that technology, isn't it? Isn't it fascinating? There's this wild kind of like silver lining with the pandemic, right? Where I think one of my favorite things is I walk into the bar now, and I scan the QR code on the table with my phone, and I pay for the order and everything, and it comes right to my table. I didn't even have to talk to anybody. Not that I don't want to talk to anybody, but at the same time, that is wildly more efficient.
Oh, this is like this is an introvert's dream world.
Yes, exactly.
It's just like I get to be in public and do all, and I don't have to talk to anybody. Like that's
amazing.
I jokingly talked about how Walmart is getting rid of all of their checkout stands. So you're self checkout. And I said, each time I go to Walmart, I've been employee of the month for 3 months in a row, but I don't get the parking spot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you can't earn it anymore. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's a very unique and strange. It's a strange time, but it's also an exciting time because you get to see innovation in real time from people, and
Oh yeah.
and whether they're companies are investing in resources like your company to say, hey, how do we use this to find how we create the next piece that our customers or clients are looking for or whatnot.
Sure.
It's it's there and available, and the companies that utilize the global collaboration of
Yeah.
multiple stakeholders are going to be the ones that succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to, I think you have to be comfortable with that transition. And I still am afraid that some companies just aren't going to be able to do it. I always think I love this story. You'd get a kick out of it. Sandy Munro, he's a very famous auto analyst. Specifically, he's an engineering analyst. When you hear auto analyst, you think of like financials, right? Spreadsheets and all that fun stuff. He actually takes cars apart. That's his entire job. He takes the car apart, he looks at every part, figures out what it will cost, how it was built, where it was sourced, and he writes an entire report on how the car was built, right? And he has this funny insight. He says, if you take apart as many cars as I have, I can tell you exactly how the org structure is broken down at any company based solely by looking at the car.
Huh.
Because the car is engineered, essentially by department, right? Which doesn't really make sense, right? You just, you just want to get heating and cooling done. It's not an exercise in HR or organizational management, right? It shouldn't be, but that's how it is, right?
Yeah.
Like, auto companies are essentially assemblers, right? They're buying parts from vendors and they're just putting them together, right? And we have the heating and cooling department, we have the seat department, et cetera, et cetera. But no one's thinking holistically about how the car is put together, right? Or should we make this car? Should we change how it's made altogether? So there's no, there's just no like kind of general knowledge about like, should we be doing this? It's all these individual units that are operating, right?
Right.
And I just find that really fascinating. I wonder, like, who are the winners and losers in this space? I mean, it's just like, and other spaces too, but I think the auto industry is in everybody's eyes right now because of climate change and because of many other reasons, right? It's fascinating. So one more question I got to ask you about AI, like, where, I mean, what do you think the solution is as AI and robots take over for people? Like, what do you think the answer is? What would you do?
It's tough
Yeah.
to be in that position to say, hey, we want to automate because automation speeds things up and makes things more efficient.
Sure. Yeah.
It reduces costs. And so you can, be someone who takes the approach of let's automate the hell out of everything. And we then, you just have a handful of people who do things. And then the other aspect is, okay, what do I do with these people? And so I think if I'm in that role of, okay, I'm going to have to automate a position and I'm going to lose someone. So if I'm a good enough leader, then I'm going to really take some time to invest into this individual and say, let's figure out, hey, what do you want to do?
Yeah. Coaching out, right? Have you ever heard of that? Yeah, exactly.
And say, because they may have to go back to what we talked about earlier.
Sure.
They may have a great idea. They just don't know how to come about making it happen. So if I have resources to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to help you flesh this out and create something out of it. I'm going to be a partner with you
Yep.
in this, because if I help get you and your idea off the ground, and that's your income source, great. I don't have to worry about providing for you
Yep.
in the way that I used to provide. But now, because I've lost an employee, but I've gained a business partner because I'm invested in them
Sure.
and
Yep.
helping them see and grow. So then not only am I invested in, but that's another revenue stream for me.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
that's
Yeah,
kind of,
I think that I absolutely agree with you. It's a very difficult problem to solve, but it's coming, and it's coming fast. I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen what every time Boston Dynamics releases a video, I mean, I'm always like, oh man, here they come. Have you seen the dancing one recently? I
yes.
mean, it's just like,
I mean, it's like, I mean, I've got so going back to the oil and gas, one of my best
yeah,
friends is an engineer for a chemical company out here,
yeah,
and he's working on a master's in data science, because he knows that that's the new currency is data.
yep,
And so he's preparing whether that he uses that within the industry he's in, or if he goes someplace else,
yep,
because he's already been tracking data as part of his job. So he's like, why not just invest more into that aspect where I can be more marketable as an
totally,
individual. And
yeah,
so,
yeah. I mean, he'll probably be building AI models, I'm sure. I
I
mean,
mean,
it's
he's and oil and gas is, is an industry that still operates in the 80s, with a lot of things.
that's
Uh,
generous.
yeah, with a lot of things. I mean, from an employee standpoint, like still using like old school spreadsheets and whatnot.
Mm,
They don't automate anything to make things simple or easy.
sure, sure.
And because the technology for most is pretty basic, so
Yeah,
there isn't a need to have all these crazy things, to do certain things.
sure.
And but it's a very labor intensive industry, so
Yeah.
they don't need a whole bunch. But that could be a whole other podcast. And by the way, you have smashed all records so far.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Is this how you end it?
Like we have been almost 2 hours, at least you and I
It's
have been
time
on here.
travel.
It's time travel. Exactly. Go. Oh, here we go. Full circle back to the DeLorean. So
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I mean, this is the best virtual hot tub hang I've had in a while.
there you go. So like, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been like done with my beer for what, I don't know how
Yeah,
long
yeah,
now.
yeah. By the way, this is a fantastic beer. I'm definitely buying more of these.
And this one was pretty good. Like, I don't know if you're a stout guy, but like,
Well, actually, it's funny. I had a couple options because again, I was deciding down to the last
yeah,
minute. I was gonna do the campfire stout, which I am gonna have
nice.
tonight, by the way. And then I had another IPA from Windy Hill. So there were a lot of options, and I just game timed it in the end. So
That's hilarious. Well,
yeah,
it may be last call here. It's definitely not last call, since you've got like 8 other beers sitting over there.
exactly.
And I got that whole fridge behind me.
Yeah.
But Rob, for our listeners this week, what is something that they can be doing to be a better leader?
Yes. Well, it's funny. We talked a lot about getting out of the comfort zone, but Kevin, that was going to be my suggestion, but we covered it so much that I'm going to just throw it out, right? And I'm going to do another one that's one of my favorites, and I don't share this very often, but I've become more public about it. Is the failure resume. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Yes. So you can learn a lot about a person from their failures instead of their wins. Although I would recommend asking, like, hey, what's something that you solved that was a really hard problem? Those are great questions to ask. But when I'm interviewing with people and learning more about them, I ask them to actually write an anti-resume, a failure resume, because the the sum of who you are, your experiences, of course, and those failures are so interesting. Like, what are your failures? What did you learn from them, right? And my recommendation would actually would be to write a failure resume, and share it with people, and learn how to talk about those failures, in in the best way possible.
I love it. That's
Yeah,
great um, advice
yeah,
for
it's
people
awesome.
listening. I mean, because yeah, we want to highlight and celebrate the successes, but it's
Yeah,
the failures that build character and build so many other things about who we are and how we go about our lives. I mean,
yeah,
if everything was a success, we'd be Tom Brady. But
exactly. Well, and the reason why I like it, by the way, if I may say, is the funny thing about business journalism in general is it's you're only reading about the success, right? And you don't hear about the failures as often,
right,
right? But the reality is there's a lot of businesses that did not make it,
right,
right? And there's beautiful lessons to learn from that, right? Why would you want to make those mistakes again, right?
yeah.
And so I'm always looking to encourage people to share those failures, and you could save people a lot of time. Boom! I just brought it back to time travel.
people are people are gonna like listen to this episode and be like, "What just happened? Where did I mean?"
I mean, we are in Berkeley, so yeah, you
Yeah.
should have known what you're getting yourself into,
uh,
Kevin.
it's only taken a while for this to make this one possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Rob,
Awesome.
for our listeners, what's the best way that they can connect with you, find you, learn more about
Yep.
IdeaScale?
Yep. So obviously we'll have everything in the show notes if you want to shoot me an email. But yeah, if you want to reach out to me on Twitter, I'm just R Hoehn at Twitter. Just I managed to get my name as a handle, so it's just RHOEHN. And yeah, send me a DM, or yeah, just you can I'll probably put my contact info in the show notes as well.
Perfect. Rob, it's
Awesome.
been a pleasure. I always
It's great.
enjoy our time. At least it's not like, sitting at the hotel bar there at, 2 a.m.
Yeah, exactly.
um,
Exactly.
you know, and so this is a much better hour or two
Yes, exactly.
during the day
Totally.
to go through all of this. But it's always been a pleasure, my friend. And thank you so much
Yes.
for joining me
Awesome.
for a glass of conversation today.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for listening to the Leaders and Loggers podcast. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms, as well as our new YouTube channel. We hope that you'll give us a like, follow, and subscribe. And you can find more about our The Floor is Java beer on our Untapped page. And then join us next week for another glass in conversation.